Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, we've got Honorable Yunusa Abubakar, who is a member of the House Committee on House Services. Good morning, Honorable. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Good morning, Chamberlain and viewers.
Yeah, quite a number of issues. I mean, this particular one comes about as a result of the comment made by at least one of your colleagues who says that the National Assembly is broke, and that something needs to be done about it. And you know how many Nigerians feel about hearing the National Assembly is broke. They've spoken about the resources allocated to the National Assembly in the first instance, and now saying that the National Assembly is broke. They think, whoa, are they trying to ask for more funds? So perhaps let's start on that note. What is this about that the National Assembly is broke?
Well, alhamdulillah, it is not an issue to laugh anyway, but probably I may put it in a different perspective. Not broke as such, but if you talk of inadequacy, that the amount allocated to the National Assembly is somewhat grossly inadequate. But to the extent of being broke, you know, it connotes a lot of meaning. So the issue at stake is that maybe in the form of nomenclature-wise, one will say the amount allocated to National Assembly is really grossly inadequate to run the structure that exists in the National Assembly.
Well, how do you react to many who feel, in the first instance, they can't relate because they don't even know or have details about the revenue that accrues and who gets what in the National Assembly? So how do they then relate when it says that there's inadequacy concerning funds?
Good. You see, the National Assembly in the first place is not a revenue generation agency. It's more or less of most of the things being allocated to the National Assembly can go to the normal day-to-day running. Let's call it overhead cost or running cost. You see, the National Assembly can be looked in this perspective. We have, apart from the complex itself and what it entails inside the complex, then you have some department. You have the budget office called NABRO. You have the NILS, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Study, which is an equivalent to a university. It's a degree awarding institution up to PhD. So it is an institution of itself. Then you have the National Assembly Service Commission that is responsible for the employment and remunerations of some staff of the National Assembly. Then when you come to the main complex, you have the 8 of the members too. The 109 senators, 360 members, they have 8. Each has a minimum of 5/8. When you talk of the principal officers, they have their own 8. When you talk of the presiding officers also, they have their own 8, numbering up to 40, 50 as the case may be, whether you are Senate President or Deputy Senate President, Speaker or Deputy Speaker. Now, having said that, you now look at the capital component of the National Assembly. All those buildings in the National Assembly, the whole complex need to be maintained. Then they have vehicles, they have tools, machineries. Then each these sections also is capitally, they have the capital component of the budget. Like, look at NILS now. They are now in the rented apartment. They need to have a permanent structure because all over West Africa, parliamentarians do come and take courses, right from certificate courses up to PhD. Then you have the National Assembly Service Commission. Recently, I think it is here on this channel that they took a tour of the Speaker and the members of the NILS that go to the permanent site. You can see the edifice being put there. All these are capital things that are being done from the budget. They saw 120 or 130 thereabout. It used to be 150 during the Jonathan administration, but for some reasons best known to the executive, it is cut down to about 115. There was a time during the last assembly, which I was a member, the budget was about 105 billion. Now, when you look at even the aid alone, take about 12 billion. So when you segregate all these sections, you look at the running cost. Now, we might not appreciate the enormous amount of money being pumped into the National Assembly until you look at each integral part of it. How much does it take when you conduct what we call, self-assessment? If you can do a kind of an assessment, needs assessment. Take each member, you now assess it vis-a-vis the bills he is to sponsor, vis-a-vis the motions he is to sponsor, and what it entails. Thank God now that we have to look inward and we are trying to have an e-parliament, that most of the things have to come electronically. But yet you need the money also, capital, the so enormous amount of money for you to even install the electronic gadget in the chamber. That is one. Then look at the whole chambers that takes 360 members. It has about a capacity of almost 900 seats, and they have to be maintained. The microphones, all these electronic chips for our electronic voting, and so on and so forth. You go to the Senate chamber as well. So when you look at all this, as I'm talking even to you now, when this issue of we have to seek the intervention of the FCT, Federal Capital Territory Administration, to really come in and see to it, because the so-called money being attached, we will, when people are talking that we are spending about 30-something billion to renovate the National Assembly. Now, that aside, compare it with our peers. When you look at where we borrow our presidential system of government, that is the United States of America, just pick your Google, your handset or iPad, just Google members' representational allowance. Then you can see members' salaries. When you compare, you can't even talk of the Nigerian system. When the whole country economically we are down, there is an economic meltdown, then the resources, the income has come down, especially with the COVID, that is worldwide, then we will agree. So
we'll look at some of those figures.
The National Assembly.
Just a moment, Honorable. We'll look at some of those figures that you have raised. We'll look at them soon. But when part of the statement credited to him, your colleague who spoke about this, was that he has said it before, he's saying it again. So does that suggest that the executive doesn't seem to agree with the legislature on this one, despite the National Assembly saying they have the power of the purse? Because if they haven't done anything about it, it suggests that they don't share the same view with you on that.
Well, you see, it depends upon how the executive view it. But the facts remain that, you see, the legislature and the executive, until recently, they have been in conflict. And a lot of people in the executive has misunderstood the works of the National Assembly. So if they wouldn't really comprehend and appreciate the work of the legislature, then I'm sorry, we will continue to be having this conflict. And we will reach a time whereby the legislative arm of government, as far as Nigeria is concerned, might not function. Let me give you an example. A lot of people are coming in, even the executive, they have been coming for committee meetings. We have been calling them either due to oversighting or public hearing. They can see how the committee rooms are very hot, that the air conditions are not working because it cannot be maintained. It used to be maintained by Julius Baja, who put the edifice in the first place. So maintenance, everybody knows, even maintenance, to put bulb. Just last week, the whole of the bulb somebody just entered from our own bureaucracy. Say, Honorable, what happened? Your office is dark. I said, well, look at it. I've been staying here for the past 6 years, and this is how it is. They have to now quickly have to ask me to make some requisition and some lighting fittings. And when you look at the lighting fittings, about whole packet of this incandescent light or fluorescent light were brought, and it's enormous amount of money. Now look at the whole over 600 offices that exist in the arm of the House of Representatives. Talk less of the Senate. So, sir, what we are saying, the people should appreciate. Now, look at it. When you look at the Congress, like I was talking, when you Google it, you will agree with me that the minimum salary of a U.S. Congress is $174,000. Convert it with our exchange rate. How many millions do you see they take monthly? 174,000 annually, which translates to over $14,000 monthly. Now, this is just salary. Then they have what we call the MRA, Members Representation Allowance, that takes care of other logistics, which in our own case, we call it running costs. In their own, the minimum or on the average is 1,444,000 thereabout. The chart is there. It was introduced in 1996 until today, the 2020 there, when you now Google it, is there. MRA, Members Representation Allowance of the U.S. Congress. You will see it. So when you compare this, the presidential system of government is really very, very costly to run. Since Nigeria chose this system of government, then we have to look into its own attendant. For the Nigerian system, when you compare how much does it, like I said, need assessment. In the last assembly, I was privileged to be part of the committee that did what we call need assessment of each member. And we came out to the conclusion that the amount being allocated to the National Assembly is grossly inadequate.
In comparing as well, I mean, we need to look at the GDPs of the countries. For example, when you look at the GDP of the US, you see it's over $20 trillion. You look at Nigeria's GDP, just less than $1 trillion. So, I mean, it's always good to look at those things in the context. So that's also another conversation right there. But, you know, speaking about, you know, issues such as maintenance and all that, looking at the Appropriation Act, that's the 2021 budget, you see that some of the line items you mentioned are actually there. You see National Assembly Management, 16 billion naira. You see National Assembly Commission, which you mentioned, legislative aids. All of them have, you know, the allocations, which totals 134 billion naira for the National Assembly. So in terms of maintenance, for example, when you talk about air conditions, when you talk about the rooms and all that, are you saying the 16 billion naira which was appropriated, for example, for this will not be enough?
It is obvious. Like, well, during your opening remarks and introduction, I'm a serving member of the House Services Committee, which is supposed to look at all these things. You see, when allocations were made on monthly basis, when they receive the receivables, they now break it. The bureaucracy is there. I will give you just one component. According to the bureaucracy, and that is our own administrators, to maintain our chamber alone, they are spending over 40 million naira monthly. 40 million naira monthly. Multiply that by 12. Then you can see how they arrive from that 16 billion that has been allocated to them. And then they have how to manage. Look at the CNA office, clerk of the National Assembly. Then you have the Senate clerk, you have the House of Reps clerks, and their own bureaucratic setup. How does it take to maintain their own impress, the running costs? So this is, and you see, what I was trying to say is that the House Services goes to the maintenance of the members and their needs.
Well, Honorable, since we're doing the calculation, if you say it costs 40 million naira monthly for the maintenance of the chambers, if you multiply that by 12, that's 480 million. That's still, I mean, and I think that's like the biggest chunk of maintenance. So that's 480 million naira.
No, it's
16 billion naira.
It. With due apology, listen, I am now in Channel Television. Ask your people how much do they charge the National Assembly for a live transmission? 2-3 hours.
You said for maintenance. You said for maintenance, it's 40 million.
I gave you only one component, sir. I gave you only one component of how.
So you're saying if you put everything together.
You read from the.
Pardon me. So you're saying if you put everything together. I know, let me just put this, just to be clear. So you say when you put everything together, 16 billion naira, which was allocated just to, National Assembly management, would not be enough. So how much will be enough then?
Well, going by our need assessment, the amount should have been doubled. Let me give you another instance. Everybody knows that we do live coverage. I mean, the Senate airs on Wednesdays, and the House of Representatives at least go live throughout our proceedings on Thursdays. Now, look at the minimum we can get is about how many millions they are charging us. At least you from the press, you know, and you should help us disseminate this information. How much are they being charged? So running it is very costly. How much do we pay the newspapers for publication? When we are to do public hearing, almost every day we conduct not less than 5 or 4 public hearings. How much do we spend on these public hearings? How much do we bill, put the bill of the bill division when they are processing it to gazette it, the paper to produce to do gazetting? So all this, when you put together, we are not just sitting here and take the amount and then divide it by the 469 thereabout members of the National Assembly. That aside, our salary is not even here. This budget does not contain our salaries. It's just the running cost. So mostly, like I said, what is taking the junk of the money is how to conduct the day-to-day business of the legislative arm of government.
Okay, so Honorable, if you say this does not contain your salary, so that means there's another provision for that entirely. Just how much is that in total?
Well, our own salary is, when you look at the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission there, they applied all our salaries. So, okay, what I'm trying to say that the 16 billion is not part of our salary. Salary is not there. The salary component is also there. So what I'm trying to say is that they have allocated the salaries, but then the National Assembly do pay it. So when I say it, the 16 billion you are cutting and the management money that is be given to run it does not include our salary.
Oh,
By
I
the
see.
time you take our salaries, put it on one side, take this running cost on one side, by the time you compute it, you discover that after paying salaries, like in the House of Representatives, which I can authoritatively talk, we have it in the House Services, after paying all the salaries, what is even left to do capital is just about 304 million on monthly basis.
Okay,
Multiply that by 12, it gives you the annual.
Quite a number of issues, really, because looking at line items, you see Senate 33 billion. I mean, that's just the item. Senate's 33 billion, House of Representatives 51 billion, then he breaks it down 51. To other 51 billion, then he goes on and on. But earlier on, you said that what used to be appropriated to the National Assembly before now was way more, and then you said the executive cut it. So does that mean what you submitted was way more, and then the executive said, well, you're not going to get this, let's cut it? How is that process really, the appropriation process for the National Assembly? Yeah,
let me come. You remember there was a time, even this economic meltdown started when the present DG of the WTO, now Dr. Ngozi was the Minister of Finance. She even said Nigeria is really, when we are about going into that recession for the first time before they exit office, there was this issue that we have to be borrowing to borrow salary, is the way we manage our resources. Then coupled with the economic meltdown worldwide, then when we then dwindling revenues, it was in that venture that the National Assembly need to cut, and then we agree, and then we allow them to cut. But as time pick up, when we are trying to cut cost of governance, we really try, and then we maintain it at the 115 until recently, when the dollar continue going, because all your purchasing ability can be compared to the dollar. Most of this in Nigeria, we don't manufacture it, we import them. So all this iPad to be given, the electronics gadget to be given, all this for us to keep in tandem with the modern realities. The basic necessities is what we are now doing. And the management is crying that when you take out what it takes for a member to produce a bill, a motion, to conduct research, oversighting, all this thing that comes in hundreds. Sometimes some of our public hearing, we run it on air live for people to see what we are doing. So all these are money consuming avenues, because nobody can give you a pro bono services. There was a time I joked here last time when we were talking about Mafia, and I said, okay, can the channels give us a pro bono services? And they say, no, it can't, because if you give pro bono service, you cannot be on air by now. So you need money, you need oil to oil and grease whatever that you need to pivot yourself on it.
Earlier, you've mentioned a number of times running costs. I'm wondering, are you talking about running costs for the National Assembly or running costs for each legislator?
Well, whichever. Let me tell you,
just a moment. I just wanted to be clear. Just a moment, Honorable. I want to find out. You've talked about the 16 billion naira, which is for the maintenance of the National Assembly. How much does a legislator, a member of the House of Representatives, get as running costs?
What we did for the need assessment for each member during the last tenure under His Excellency Yakubu Dogara, we came out with at least a member need not less than 25 million monthly to effectively discharge. That is what you call impress. These are a retirable amount of money that as an impress effectively to run your office, which is, if not more, equivalent to that of a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, what we are getting now is by far less than 10 million to run. How do you come about that? The issue of your foreign travels is there, your escort. If you are to travel, how many times a member need to go for oversight function? Thanks to COVID, this is not being redone to virtual meetings. But yet, there are some traveling that is absolutely necessary. You have to enter these parliamentary associations, Commonwealth Parliamentary Associations, ACP, EU, ECOWAS, a lot of them that you have to undertake. Now, what is the cost of foreign trip with your escort? About $900 a day when you travel out. Then the DTA, duty travel allowance, when you are to travel outside Abuja to do some oversight for most of these federal government agencies across the nation. So when you put all this in, you aggregate them together, the cost of public hearing, which at least you cannot conduct a public hearing with less than 10 million per public hearing. How many public hearings do we conduct in a week, in a month, and throughout the year? So when you talk of running costs, during that tumble time, it used to be with the bureaucracy that member has to apply, then you'll be given the money. At the end of it, you retire. The House services deem it fit that is slowing down the work of members. You have to travel, and it will come in a week's time, maybe just 7 days, for you to make application, for it to be approved, to go through the bureaucratic norms. You discover it will take about 3 weeks. Before, if you cannot embark on this trip until the money is approved, you end up missing the trip.
All right, Honorable,
you know, a colossal damage.
Sometimes people wonder, is that why the National Assembly often insists on certain things getting to public hearing, even though the public says, no, we don't like this bill? But we'll talk about that when we return in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, Honorable, lots of reactions coming through about costs of maintenance of the chamber. They don't believe that. How could you be spending 40 million per month? But then you did talk about comparing what maybe a U.S. legislature earns with that of Nigeria, saying some sort of disparity. But, Labour has spoken up in a similar fashion, which the National Assembly don't seem to agree with them. They talk about the minimum wage. The average minimum wage, I think, is at 2019 in U.S., $7.25. And if you multiply that by 410 per hour, which is what it is, dollar exchanges in some areas in the country, you see, and then maybe by 8 hours a day, by 31 days per month, you see that the average Nigerian earns far less of a minimum wage, which is the yardstick for which you are using to say the National Assembly needs more money. So can we then say that on that basis, the National Assembly should be looking to agree with Labour concerning the minimum wage if you're comparing countries, or US, for instance, with what Nigerians earn as minimum wage?
I hope the viewers cannot understand me the way you do, but if that is, I'm very sorry. What we are trying to say is this is what is tenable as international standard best practices. Now, your colleague have raised the issue of our GDP. We are hoping to grow to reach there. What I'm trying to clear our mind to put us in this correct perspective is that Nigeria is not yet Uhuru. We are not yet there. For us to be crying is too much. There must be a relativity. It is a relative term compared to who? So now when we compare from where we borrow their system, the presidential system of government, which is very costly, I'm just trying to give us to serve as a yardstick. So if this is where we hope to attain, we are by far not even there. Now, generally speaking, when we compare some other parameters, just like the GDP growth, our revenue that is coming, our non-productive posture, that Nigeria is not a producer nation, that we can enhance, the strength of our currency internationally, and some any other variables, then we have to admit that we have to contend with what we have, because we cannot do, there will be no any other miracle we can do to give us much money to satisfy our need. So it cut across labor, the parliament. We are also part of labor. We are also a labor union because we earn salary and we belong to labor organization. That's why some of us are being called comrades. So in essence, when people are talking generally that the money given to National Assembly is even too much, what we are saying, it is inadequate compared to variables as it is tenable now. That doesn't mean that the National Assembly is saying that it's broke totally. But what we are saying, going at this rate, and if nothing is done, I fear that we might not be able to sustain our legislative arm of government like we are sustaining the judiciary and the executive arm of government.
Now, given that variable, Honorable, take a look at this message from Gyang. He's been listening intently to this conversation, and he has a suggestion. What the Honorable member has just confirmed is that having two legislative chambers is not sustainable. Do you agree with him?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Look at Ghana, our peers in the ECOWAS region. They are not doing a bicameral kind of legislation because the Senate is not operating independent of the House of Representatives. That is one misnomer that people don't understand. You see, whatever laws that is being passed singularly at the Senate chambers, it needs the House of Representatives concurrence and vice versa.
Yeah. Are you then suggesting, Honorable,
this House cannot do so?
Just a moment, just to put it in context, would you agree with those who say, rather than have two chambers, we should collapse the National Assembly into one chamber, House of Representatives and Senate should be just one chamber as opposed to having two? That should cut down some costs.
Why not? If that will cut costs of governance, then we have to change our constitution.
Yeah, is this something you think the House of Representatives will be willing or glad to discuss?
Why not? We are for the people, and if that's the desire of the people, the desire of the people, why not? We amend our constitution. We abrogate the presidential system of government.
Yeah, would you then be happy to come up with a bill to the effect?
Well, there are members' personal bills that come, that are there and that we are being processed. But mostly, this should have come from the executive, so that we will embark on constitutional review. And you see, there are certain norms in the constitutional review that the state component, the federating unit, are also involved. And we are having problem with the houses of state houses of assembly for us to garner the 2/3 majority to effectively amend our constitution. These are some of the bottlenecks that we are having. until the governors queue in. The public also queue in. After all, the same people who elected us are the same people who elected the governors, who elected the state members of the assembly. The way it is now, the state assemblies are supposed to be controlling the governors, but the reverse is the case. So unless the people, the media, I mean, people have that understanding and they feel that they have the powers of the ballot to really tailor the state houses of assembly to really dictate what is happening to the governors. That could only be possible that if selfish interest is removed. That is, if the electorate now can actually dictate to their respective state houses of assembly, and invariably each state can queue into this project, then we can actually trim the cost of governance in all the three arms of government, so that Nigeria can now cut his own spend from his purse. I mean, to cut the cut according to our own size. But the way we are going with this presidential system of government and the way our revenues are going, unless and if a miracle happen tomorrow to generate more income, I'm afraid we might not be able to sustain the whole governance, not just the legislative arm in government. So if there could be a way, senators operate, you take the Kenyan scenario, they don't have a Senate chamber. Take the Ghanaian example, they're having a parliamentary system. It's all, even their deputy president, vice president, and some other ministers come from the parliament. Take France, take the EU. This is the practice there, other than the American system that we are blindly copying.
Okay, well, Honorable,
when we know that we don't have the resources to sustain it.
Okay, well, so still talking about this issue of comparison, but first of all, when you say that the funds available or the money appropriated to the National Assembly is inadequate and you're asking for more, pretty much, so that means that you think that there is some place that the money is, really, you think that the money is there. So where do you think the government can get the money from to channel into some of the needs that you have in the National Assembly?
Okay, let me come from another perspective. We are having a budget of 13 trillion. The recent one, or the one that we are in now, 2021, January to December. We are having a budget of 13 trillion, 13 trillion. Then take this 134 being the budget, billion being the budget of the National Assembly. What percentage is it? I believe it is less than 1%. It's not even up to. Even if it is more than 1, it's not up to 2%. Now, this 2%, this is the amount you want to arm a government that is dutifully saddled constitutionally to oversight, to make sure that the remaining 98% of this 13 trillion is not wasted, is really put on the framework. Are you fair to the system?
Honorable, that perspective doesn't quite answer my question. So let me try to rephrase it. Where do you think we can get that money from to fund or better fund the National Assembly?
Get it from that 98%. Source it, mop it out.
Well,
from that
Honorable,
98%,
that's a bit
at least
ambiguous.
take it to about 5%.
Honorable, that's ambiguous, you know. I mean, that 98% has been allocated.
Ambiguous.
So specifically speaking, now, because, I mean, there are different line items. If you go through the pages, over 1,000 pages of the appropriation, really, when you take out the items. So which of them, particularly, do you think that money can be taken from?
You see, we were talking, when you look at the budget grossly, there are so many agencies that, as I'm talking to you now, they are redundant. So many of them. Look at the line item of the federal budget. Don't look at the National Assembly alone. There are so many of them that are redundant. Some of them are inadequately funded. Some of them are overfunded. Now, take this issue of insecurity. If we don't have insecurity, where will the defense have almost 900 billion? It's the highest. So many ways are there to cut. I mean, to cut corners. I don't want to go into there, but if we want to do it, we must do it. All I'm trying to do is that you cannot give me 1 naira to look at somebody how to spend 1,000. I can either be compromised or I may not have the proper tools to confront and tell him to do the needful. And that is what is happening when we are processing and administering this war against the bandit, the insurgent, and whatever. Because we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the tools, we don't have the modern weapons to confront them.
But you know,
and
when you speak
when
about...
you do that, it translates to Naira and Kobo.
When you speak about security, I mean, the WTO DG who is visiting the country did say Nigeria's global trade figures is just a mere 0.33%. And when you say if Nigeria doesn't have insecurity, you're a member of the ruling party. Who better to blame if not the ruling party? You are in power. You should ensure that we don't have this insecurity problem in the first place.
You see, the issue is not the vehicle, but the person driving the vehicle. I and you are the Nigerian people, and we are the Nigerian government taking the definition of democracy. Now, what we are saying, people are talking of restructure. We have to restructure our mind, though this is a subject for another time. How patriotic are we? It's not about the APC, it's not about the PDP. How patriotic are we? Are we in governance and then looking at our own, or we took the nation to be above our own selfish primordial interests? That is what Nigerians should be questioning. That should have been the issue. Even if we have the minimum resources, are we ready to make some sacrifices so that the country can be better and be a better place to live?
What does that mean? What kind of sacrifice are you talking about?
Sorry?
What kind of sacrifice are you talking about here?
The sacrifice, how we can do with little to achieve much.
But the National Assembly has little. Can't the National Assembly do much with that?
That is what we are doing. We are trying to do within the limited, scarce resources, we are trying to give our best. That is how we manage to stay suffocating. I am now in your studio without air condition. I might not be able to talk. But if life goes on, we are doing this life problem and your air condition goes, I have to continue. That is a sacrifice. Maybe after I can go and look for medication. So this is what is happening, and it's a kind of sacrifice that the members of the National Assembly are doing. We conduct our committee works, we conduct our oversighting, we do our citizens preliminary under these humid conditions.
Well, I don't understand what you mean by... Well,
so that's a sacrifice.
I don't quite get that part of without the air condition, because the system is really there, unless you ask them to put it off. So, of course, it is indeed that. But speaking about security, we've seen several times how governors have spoken about their frustration about what to do with security. The country has talked about the policing structure, how we need to reorganize it. I think even the VP did say policing a country of this size from the center doesn't quite cut it. And therein lies the issue, the National Assembly. The ball is in your court to amend those laws and ensure that states or restructuring of the police force occurs. But it fell through when it came to the National Assembly. So who then do you blame? What is the role of Nigerians here if this is what they wanted? And the National Assembly said, well, we didn't see that clause properly. They even promised to revisit it until date. The rest is history.
Well, the National Assembly did not turn down the wishes of the people. Peradventure, I happen also to be a member of the Constitutional Amendment Committee. We just sat last week and we rolled out our timetable program. We are on course. In fact, just this Thursday, Friday to Saturday, we're having a 3-day retreat to approach all these issues. And I'm telling you, the issue of security, like breaking the security architecture, the policing, community policing, trying to break it, because actually Nigeria is too large for a centralized policing system. That is one. Number two, even the way we go about combating some of the menace, bedeviling the peaceful coexistence of the Nigerians is also going to be looked into. But most important is, like I said, is the conscience, our mindset about eating where you work. I'm not blaming the security agencies, but in a way we have to. They do compromise to get money. You found some security personnel giving information to the insurgent, to the bandit, to get money in return. In many instances, a lot of police officers, DPOs are bound to be compromised along Kaduna Road, to be turning their eyes when people, armed robbers, kidnappers are operating. These are there, but it's for the record. The DSS and whatever they are doing, they are intelligent and they are gathering it. So go to the military. You see the amount of money they are making when they put roadblock in Borno State. The governor have said it severally, charging 5,000, 10,000 per trailer, making millions out of the border. So compromising. We saw a security personnel that compromised one kidnapper in Taraba State. So we don't need to say that we know. So our problem is we need to really check ourselves and know that we are working for this nation and be contented with our salaries. That is the issue.
Honorable, earlier you said something, that some would find a little shocking. You said that there are some ministries, departments, and agencies to whom money have been appropriated, that many of them are redundant. I'm wondering how the House of Representatives Committee on, working with any of those agencies or departments of government are coping with that. I mean, if you knew that from the previous year they were redundant, how come money was still appropriated to them this year?
Let me give you one instance. I happen to be a member of a justice committee. I won't mention that specific department or agency under justice that I oversight. They have almost overhead salaries throughout there, almost about in billions, but only 40 million naira is allocated for them. So you pay personnel in billions just to administer 40 million. What do you call that? I don't have the vocabulary to describe that. That is one. And there are several, many of them, that sometimes their statutory roles is not being given to them.
I'm asking, Honorable.
That's the issue.
That's the question I'm asking, Honorable. If such a situation exists, what has your committee done about that, for instance, to ensure that the nation is not, as you say, ripped off?
Is to raise alarm, and we don't execute. We say alarm, then we send it to the executive and draw their attention. So the executive arm of government, the president is an executive that have absolute powers to do that. So what if you talk, you raise, you blow the whistle, and nobody attend to it? What do? You shut the government, which is not within our own ambit of our own constitutional roles.
But it baffles people because the ruling party, but the leadership of the National Assembly, in fact, majority of the National Assembly, are of the same party with the ruling party. So if they can't have that conversation and address this, how then do you run a country?
That's why I say there has to be a retreat to change the psyche of the people of the executive. We were here on channels sometime 3, 4, 5 years back, and somebody from the executive is saying it's not even mandatory for the president to even implement the budget being passed by the National Assembly. What are you talking? We are here in Nigeria. So somebody found himself in the executive arm who doesn't know the working and the nitty-gritty of the National Assembly. And you put him there. And when you talk, it's that yes, it has to be there. You were there when you see the executive people, ministers coming there confronting the National Assembly. And yet, we are like a toothless bulldog.
But Honorable...
So unless that issue is there, and if the National Assembly could exert her powers, then the same public will be talking that the National Assembly is holding back the government, is slowing down the government, is not agreeing with the government. So that is the issue. Ours is to raise and allow them whoever, if I happen to be the president, I will do things differently.
Let me just lean on that, Honorable. What exactly would you do differently?
Yeah, I will look at the present practices. It's not going to be business as usual. We will definitely, is going to be business unusual. There are so many things I will bring. I will stand my feet. I will oversight. I won't be relying. Yeah, I will delegate, but then I will make sure that the authority is with me. And I will not put any no-nonsense somebody to head an agency. So we have to really be, I will be in tandem with my National Assembly, let them do their oversight function. I will even extend that all the oversight activities of National Assembly, find a way, a look back to me so that I will know what is happening.
So, Honorable, isn't the President doing...
the DSS, the intelligent people to be on their toes.
So, Honorable, isn't the President doing all these things that you mentioned now?
He is doing, but he needs some able lieutenants. That's what there are a lot of Judas in the presidency. And I can tell you, and without apology.
And some of them are members of the ruling party?
Look, I don't even, I'm not, if they are not members of the ruling party, they are affected. But do you know that for the good part of this government, the rule is like a kind of a mixture. It's just like you have rice and beans mixed together, or jollof, with the green beans and everything together, with even the black seed. At the time when this presidency came in, people thought there's going to be a total overhaul of this country. But he ruled around with the PDP people. All the PDP appointments, none of them were dropped until they finished their tenure. Some of them were even renewed. Some of them were even taken. Well, in the view of saying that if you are good, then you are good. Just like the Adesina now, he was a minister there, but it was this same government that promoted him, take him to African Development Bank. Yes, these are good things that we have. We have the Ngozi now, though she wasn't there 2015, but at least she was found worthy from the World Bank now to the World Trade Organization. So we have worthy ambassadors, but we have worst ambassadors.
Honorable, it's quite baffling to hear that there are some Judases, to use that expression. And if you know that story, you know how it ends, the betrayal and what happened afterwards. But we don't quite want that to happen. So what do we need to do now to ensure that betrayal doesn't lead to the worst?
Anybody that has been uncovered, that has been discovered to have been a Judah, should be shown the way out. And with immediate effect. An expeditious, judicious panel of inquiry should be set up and then kick him out of service.
Well, as we wind down now,
a lot of people...
Sorry, we understand that some members couldn't go or can't go to their constituency to participate in some of those registration exercises that the party did ask of them. Does the party, do they raise these issues to the authorities, since they're in the same party, about the situation with insecurity in the country?
Well, really, if somebody couldn't go for the revalidation exercise, cannot go to his constituency, a member of this chamber that I belong, then I'm sorry for that person. Because even where there are this insecurity, there are people from Kalabalge, all this where this Boko Haram are there, and they are members. How was their election processed? So to me, I think some people are overblowing it. The whole local government has been relocated from the insurgency maybe to the headquarters to Maiduguri. Then the same machinery can be uprooted for them to revalidate. So I can't actually find it comfortable to say that some members cannot go because of this. If there is, then the situation is so pathetic that I think.
All right, Honorable Yunusa Abubakar, member, House Services Committee, and also a member of the Defense Committee. We do thank you for your perspectives this morning.
Thank you.
All right, well, back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed, we're talking about security again today, and as you may have seen in that welcoming slide, Major Gabriel Adofiku is a immediate past Secretary General, retired Army, Navy, Air Force Officers Association. Good morning. Thank you for joining us again today. Just looking through all that happens, what kind of conversation goes on amongst your former professional colleagues when you see all of these things going on? Do you feel, look, security agencies certainly not living up to their billing?
Good morning, Chamberlain. It's nice being around with you. Thank you for inviting me. First,
oh dear, well, clearly not coming through yet, but we'll check that connection again and see how that can be sorted. I mean, I was just trying to get a sense of, maybe there's a group of his professional colleagues looking through all that is happening. You certainly will have a thought or two about, oh dear, why is this happening? What could have happened here? And then security officials will always tell you, we do come up with intelligence and we pass it on. Oh. So it depends on what they do with it when we pass it on.
And it reminds me of the conversation we had yesterday about think tanks.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have a lot of brilliant minds in defense, military, security, and the rest, and they come together, they come up with ideas. This is what is wrong. This is how insecurity is shape-shifting. So it's always good to lean on that vast resource of brain, mental capacity in combating insecurity. Because truth be told, if there's anything we have learned, this is not something just for government.
Yeah.
This is not something just for the army. It's a collective effort, absolutely.
The challenge, guys, for me is, even again, that conversation we had yesterday between the two retired army generals that we spoke with. One thing that stood out for me, and still a major concern, is, okay, I'm going to go there, the kinetic or the non-kinetic. But the one that is really painful is the non-kinetic, the social welfare. We were speaking with Colonel Nyam yesterday, and he was saying, look, when the Constitution talks about welfare and security, it's clearly talking about the kinetic and non-kinetic. Security being the hardware, the military, and all of those. But the welfare being the social welfare. Clearly, if we took enough care of the welfare angle, I'm wondering if we will still have the level of insecurity that we have on our hands. And that is one of the things that a good number of, security consultants that we have spoken with have also said that, look, whether we like it or not, unemployment figures, poverty figures, hunger figures, these things are pointers to insecurity. And we're wondering, is it that we're unaware, or that we can't even take on these issues as simply as they ought to be taken? So it's a major challenge, Chamberlain, and I'm just wondering how long it's going to take us to think it through.
Well, let's get back to Major Adofiku. He's still on. Do we have you on now, Jonah? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so go ahead. You were going to speak about what? The impression or that of your colleagues about what's going on.
Yes. First of all, if you can hear me now, Chamberlain, I want to appreciate all of you for the job you are doing. Very quickly, your question is, what is our impression of the security situation in the country? And I like to say it in a very summarized form that not only are we as a nation embarrassed, as a section of the nation that has been saddled with, and our colleagues still being saddled with, the responsibility of managing the security of the nation, we feel very, very sad, very concerned. However, I would like to make certain points very clear very quickly. One, the security architecture of any nation is not indicative in nature. Two, the design of the security architecture of a nation is explicit of the demands of a nation. We can only pick one of those from other nations in order to complement or to engage that which you already have.
General, pardon me, I think that line is not too clear. Can't make out what you're saying clearly, but we'll try and adjust that and get it back on so we can all get it a lot clearer. But you know, there are just there appear basic questions about these things, because we've seen governors from the north to the south complain about what is going on. And we know that the Governors Forum is a huge, do we call them the highest pressure group in the country? Because if they put their foot down about certain things, there's over 70% chance that they will get what they want. So the question then is, what do they think about this? And not just individually. Do they agree on what to do about this kind of challenge? And if they do, why are we still where we are? Does it suggest that they haven't yet? Who knows? Well, let's try and see if we do have him back. General, could you please go ahead?
Yes. Again, like I was saying, the security situation is sad to all, particularly we who have been part of the security arrangement of the country as ex-service personnel, and those and our colleagues who are in service, we feel for them. But again, we feel for the nation. Putting sentiments apart and expressions of emotions aside, I would like just to point out certain fundamental issues concerning the security of this nation. One, we have several times mouthed the expression that security is the responsibility of everyone. But we have always failed to articulate and in cases explicitly define what are the roles of everyone. Because if you say security is the responsibility of everyone and you don't tell everyone what is their duty, then you find there will be blank files in your system. Secondly, the security setup in the country needs a close review. Today, all emphasis is on the armed forces. I can appreciate the reason for that. When you watch on TV and you see pictures of people carrying GPMGs, as the general purpose machine gun, rocket propelled grenade launchers, and the grenades fused on, and you see anti-aircraft weapons being mounted on jeeps. Those are not the kind of weapons you will want a police arrangement, a civil police arrangement to address. Those are not the kind of things you would want vigilantes to address. Those are not the kind of things you will want hunters to address, because those things carry, they are weapons of mass destruction. They are highly toxic. So, with that understanding, coming back to our situation in the country, now we have severally expressed that majority, in quotes, of these attackers, bandits, whatever we call them, Boko Haram, and in whatever name, that they come across our borders, that they are foreigners. Now, if you put that on the queue, if they are foreigners, that they have free access, entry and exit into our country, completely challenges the status of our immigration system, the border control system. Now, if you say these people carry this heavy equipment coming and out of the country, it challenges our customs, border control system as it affects customs in terms of non-human equipment, materials coming into the country.
You know,
Yes.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was going to say that. Therefore, a starting point would have been, how do we block this inflow and outflow of humans and equipment? And when you ask that kind of question, you want to provide an answer to it, then suddenly you see government come up with a policy on visa on arrival. For a country like Nigeria, I think that policy again accentuated, knowing that on arrival everybody can take any bush path and disappear into the country. That again calls to some questions. Why, on what basis we really have to do that with the kind of security situation we have?
What has visa on arrival policy have to do with this? Are you saying people will carry JMG, JPG to the airports, taking advantage of visa on arrival policy?
Chamberlain, you know and I know, if you have had the opportunity of visiting any of our border posts, particularly in the northern part of the country, you will find out that you can stroll away 200 meters from the immigration point and you take any bush path, you are inside the country. So that again has affected the influx of these elements. But like I was saying, I'm just beginning from that border control. The border control, the immigration service, the customs service, and every role player at that had to be reformed, repositioned, and reinforced.
I'm sorry, in order to help us understand this a little better, do you have any stats to show that before the visa and arrival policy, this was the situation? And with the introduction of the visa and arrival policy, this is what we now have. Do you have that, for instance, to justify your point that the visa and arrival policy is aggravating the matter? Because for economic purposes.
I just use the visa on arrival policy as one of the factors that would have accentuated an already fluid situation. You have an already fluid situation. Now, ask ourselves, what was the basis of that policy? Was it that people were closing our embassies overseas and we needed to ease the pressure of the embassy by allowing people to come on arrest? Was it the desperate attempt that the language we use ease on investment to bring in foreign investments into the country? These are questions that we have not been able to sit down together and answer to ourselves. Like I say, it is accentuated an existing porous border control system that we have.
All right, we'll come back to this in just a moment, guys. That particular policy, we're just trying to find out, because there are several countries that do have the same policy way before we introduce ours. They don't have the kind of challenge we've got. And so that's what we're trying to find out from him. So what figures do you have to say that the visa and arrival policy, because it was an economic decision. They said, look, that was to boost economic trade. And so if you're saying that that is contributing to the thing, then we need to see those figures.
Especially when you know that the economy and security are tied together. Our guest earlier on was saying where we are now is the fact that insecurity is fueling unemployment. And don't forget, unemployment was fueling insecurity. So it's now a vicious cycle as it is. But also, I don't know if we have Major back, just trying to clean that audio so our viewers can understand and hear what he's saying well. When you look at the recent attacks we've had, in Katsina, for example, we've had in Niger State, we've had in Zamfara. Now the abduction is in Kaduna. And when you look at the positioning of the states, you realize that those are the three states bordered Kaduna already. So yes, we could talk about blocking those arms from coming into the country, but as it stands now, they're in the country and they're moving inwards, if I could just use that, because they were first around those states. Now Kaduna, what states will they be going to next? So that will be another angle of this. The ones we have on ground, how are we going to ensure? Okay, I think we have Major back. So Major Adofiko, so yes, we can also talk about ensuring that those arms don't come into the country and all that. But for the ones we have in the country already, seeing how it seems this insecurity is moving from state to state, how do we block that?
Yes. Now, I'm going to give you a very quick, because of time available to us, a very quick run through on what I think are the issues that we must address immediately. First of all, beginning with the armed forces. The armed forces had a structure that is called the order of battle for the nation. That order of battle, I will not be in the position to discuss the detail on television. But in recent times, with the development of one task force arrangement here and there, it has impaired the capacity of clear definition of terms of lines of engagement of our forces on the ground. So leave that there. For the police, I want to say this. The police is structured in a manner that in every community, you have a post, and then you have units, then you have a station, then you have a division, and then you have a state command, and then the zonal command. These structures are designed to cover the whole across-board gamut of the society. In other words, a small community like Kagara which is a semi-urban setting, has a divisional police station. And I couldn't understand why 500 meters radius of that particular location in Niger State, there is no police station, no police post. It is this kind of close to the people setting that will ease communication. I overheard when you were discussing with the honorable member the communication capacity in terms of security challenges. Please, the truth of the matter is that there is a distortion in the capacity of the public to interface with these security arrangements. Not to talk about the DSS. The DSS, we know that in every local government, they have a subunit there. This subunit, what do? Do they collect, and transmit intelligence? Then you talk about another big body which we armed a couple of less than 10 years ago, the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense, whom we say should augment the visible security presence, the visible policing system in our environment. For Christ's sake, I was watching your transmission some few minutes ago of loading children that were taken away, those number of children. I could see that averagely it took about 38 seconds for each child to climb down from that military vehicle. So you can imagine how people come and load these ones away on bikes and whatever means and take them away in such large quantities. Not to talk about 10s, 20s, but hundreds.
So if I could jump in at that point, does that then suggest, are you suggesting that certainly some authorities are involved in what is going on?
I am suggesting that our information management as far as security is concerned is under challenge, and we must do something very quickly on it. It is possible that the transmission, the communication of intelligence may be there, but probably not acted upon. If that is the case, then we have a big problem.
One other issue, just a moment as we wind down gradually. One other thing that one wonders about all of this is, in the first place, these things shouldn't be happening. So we're doing a lot more of fighting than preventing. And I think you underscored it in the information dissemination that you talked about now. You itemized the fact that intelligence all over the nation is there. Whether or not those intelligence get ahead to people as and when due is another thing altogether. And from the little analysis that you've given us now, average 38 seconds for each child to climb up or down from a vehicle. I mean, that's quite significant. What do you think happened to intelligence at that point? And whose head should roll?
Thank you very much, my brother. You have just asked the kind of question I like asking. For Christ's sake and for crying out loud, have you heard that anybody has been relieved of his appointment for such a major incident as we've been experiencing in a row? Nobody. Yes, we were all crying. I remember I was on one of your programs when there was this outcry about service skills being changed and all that. Well and good. And I commented as a passing message that time that how sure are we that just changing service chiefs may not be a palliative, but that does not deal with the fundamental. Again, we are seeing it resurging or resurfacing. What we need to do as a nation is, as a people, is begin to take responsibility for our circumstances. And what do I mean? Particularly public office holders. If I am a commissioner of police in a state and 200 students were taken, before you even begin your program 7 a.m. in the morning, I would have tendered my letter of resignation. I'm not going higher than that, because it will become political. That's the Nigerian nature. Similarly, I have not seen a situation where we've been told the unit commander whatever security arrangement in that area, or the unit commanders, because we have a horde of them there. You have the civil defense, you have the police, you have the SSS, you have everybody there. Before you even call in the military, these agencies have roles to play. What roles have they been playing? I give you a very an illustration that will prove my point. 45 years ago, I was in the wee days of the reign of Amadou Ahidjo and the beginning of the current president of the Cameroons. I strolled into one of the Cameroonian villages, and within 30 minutes, the unit police commander there had been informed of my presence and had come to ask, please, what are you really here for? Look, sometimes people give you an unnecessary impression that is a stiff control, that is a communist approach. No.
All right.
These are what you call social accountability. We don't have social accountability. We don't even know who is where at any moment in the community. These kind of useful information are the things that help us.
All right, Major Gabriel Adofiku, we do thank you for your perspectives this morning. I mean, the country is not short of advice and suggestions as to what to do.
We
But
have time to be very frank to ourselves on this. It's time we get cracking and deal decisively with the issues as it is. People should take responsibility for their failures. We should stop having explanations or excuses for failures. I think that is a starting point for us as a nation. Thank you.
all right, thank you very much indeed. All right, let's take a look at some of the messages.
Well, the first one will be coming on the screen any moment now, so we'll know. I think it's from Yomi, or something like that. Yes, that is it. Says the methods of recruitment in public office, leadership positions, and general mindset around governance needs to change in Nigeria. Why would one who's called, trained, and employed to protect people go behind to work with enemies of the country or employer?
That's a big question there. Let's take a look at the next one. Well, there you go from Manasseh, saying, why can't the National Assembly ensure critical measures to increase the numerical strength of our security forces, increase their visible oversight, and expose all weaknesses, and ensure people take responsibilities for their actions?
Well, this next one says, the honorable member talks about 13 trillion and forgets the 5 trillion deficit, debt servicing, and increased borrowing. We don't have 13 trillion to spend. There is nothing to restructure. No, there's nothing to mop up, sir. Go unicameral. Get part-time lawmakers. Restructure to deconstruct, decongest the center. Well, will that happen?
Well, we hope that the Honorable, as he said, would legislate it. James says the National Assembly will continue to have members who go there to defend the bogus budget allocation to itself rather than make the necessary sacrifice using little to create more. Restructuring it to one house will reduce costs.
And you know what they say? You know what? Let's take the next tweet. We need part-time National Assembly. Well, that's what they say, in a truly federalized system where the units control their resources against this current system. The legislators rather, are earning far too much for doing nothing, he says. I don't know a poor former National Assembly member. That's quite an interesting statement.
This one is also from Augustine. That's yours.
Well, it says that legislative business in Nigeria should not be run as a full-time business. It should be run on a part-time basis, and legislators should be paid on an hourly basis, because some members do not attend sittings and yet still earn for services not rendered.
I mean, have KPIs, have targets, have, clock in and clock out time.
Do we have an audit system for the legislature?
Oh.
Don't answer the question.
Okay.
Well, because you have the answer. There you go.
Well, that's the show for today, everyone. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for watching. I am Kayode Kikelu.
Please do stay safe. I'm Ayo Makinde.
We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?